We're off. So, welcome to the Decompression Chamber. Joining me this week is an Army veteran. I knew him from the University of Utah, but please welcome Mike. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for doing this. I apologize for being a little rusty at this, but yeah, welcome to the Decompression Chamber. I've known you for years, probably yeah, since I started going back to school, so almost 10 years now. And I know a little bit of your story, but not all of it, so I'm excited to get it. But yeah, let's start back at the beginning. You're from Washington State originally, right?
Yes, yep. I was born and raised in Woodinville, Washington. It's kind of a suburb about half hour from Seattle.
Okay,
Uh, Very well known these days for the Chateau Saint Michel winery.
awesome. Yeah, a place known by its alcohol. Yeah,
Right.
that's some good
Yeah.
character.
So I grew up in Woodinville. Um, when I was a kid, it was very rural. Lots of forest. It was, kind of a dream for a little boy to have like acres and acres of forest to play in and,
Oh yeah.
go. So, I had my group of friends. We palled around on our mountain bikes and played cowboys and Indians and army and sports
Awesome.
and, jumped off the roof onto the trampolines and, the stuff that kids are supposed to do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's
Yeah.
yeah, that's like it's like a dream come true. And of course, forest kind of goes without saying. I think that's probably what most people think of with the Pacific Northwest outside of the
Yeah.
cities. Okay,
Yeah.
that's great.
Then it was, I'd say about sixth grade-ish. Microsoft moved in to the
Ah,
area
that
and Woodinville turned like ritzy overnight.
uh, same thing happened in my hometown. Yeah,
Yeah.
funny how that
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, but growing up, um, I was playing sports through school, did football and track and things like that. And as I got into high school, I was kind of a turned into like a little bit more of a loner kid at like junior high through high school.
Hmm.
And first had this need to like become like the toughest kid around. And so I started like making my activities significantly like more risky.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. You got to
next
push the
thing,
limits. How are you gonna get
right.
tough
So the next
without
thing
that?
I was boxing in high school, and then boxing wasn't tough enough. So then I started bull riding, and had a blast doing the rodeo thing for a couple of years there. And then high school ended, and I joined the Marine Corps. College wasn't even on my mind.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
And so I was in boot camp for the Marines 3 days after I graduated high school. So this was 2000, so pre 9/11. So I got about a
Wow.
little over a little over a year of the peacetime military before 9/11 happened. Uh,
I mean, what was that like? I mean, because that's obviously it's a huge shift in the collective mind. But I mean, what was pre 9/11 Army like? Was it as tough as you were expecting, or what?
Remember, this is pre 9/11 Marines right
Oh,
now.
Marine, right? So I mean, what
Yeah,
was that? What was
can't
that?
mix
What?
those up.
Sorry about that. I swear I'm paying
Yeah, so
attention.
it was, it was just it was a lot of training. I was stationed at Sub Base Bangor with the Security Force Detachment.
Oh yes, I was stationed there once upon a time as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, it was just a lot of training. Um, I think I had my first real world like wake up call a couple months before 9/11.
Hmm.
We were running a drill and had a rollover vehicle accident, and I lost my first two buddies there.
Oh my. Oh.
Uh, yeah. So then a couple months after that, 9/11 happened, and my world changed overnight.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and it was interesting because like people's reasons for being in the military became very clear right after 9/11. That you
Oh
had
yeah.
guys that were amped, like, let's go do this. Then you
Sure.
had other guys that were like, I didn't sign up for this. This is college benefits, right? And
Right, right. Yeah, there's a big
yeah,
disparity. Well, and I mean, if you're a Marine at Sub Base Bangor, I mean, you're an infantry Marine, right? I mean, that's
right.
all the security guys that they had. So it's not just like, oh, yeah, you guys are just going to be staying here. I mean, this is huge effect. You're
Yeah.
not just any
Yeah.
Marine. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So you saw a lot of guys working on getting out while other guys were um, amped, and
Sure.
it created quite a bit of division actually within the unit when you saw people's true colors like that.
Yeah.
Mostly towards the ones that didn't actually want to be there for the right reasons.
Right, right. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
they'll try
but
and
it,
get you
yeah,
in
and
with
everything,
anything.
yeah, and everything just changed overnight. The security procedures and everything,
Oh, yeah.
based on what's on Subbase Bangor, like we locked down for, I don't even remember how long, but we didn't leave the base for a long time.
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is some
Um,
super secret squirrel stuff that goes on there. Like people don't realize, any
yeah.
sometimes you'll see pictures of the different piers floating around the internet and it's like, yeah, that's older than like when I was there. They
Right.
don't want you knowing what that stuff looks like.
Yeah. Well, I remember like pre 9/11, like my mom came in to visit
Yeah,
and we drove right down to the pier and showed her the subs sitting out there and everything. And after
crazy.
9/11, you couldn't even get close to the pier unless you
Oh no.
needed to be there. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you
Even
needed
if you're stationed on the base, like,
Yeah, yeah. It was a big deal. Now they still had something when I was there, like for Christmas, families could come kind of close to something. I don't remember the entire thing, but I mean even that was like it was pretty locked down. There's only like one specific spot
yeah.
they could go to. They had to be escorted out. I mean it was pretty.
I think my time there was too close to 9/11 for that to happen.
Yeah, yeah. They hadn't figured out all the kinks. That was never
Right.
gonna happen.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy
So
times.
so then because of 9/11, stop loss, stop moved happened with all
Yes.
the with everybody that was stationed at Bangor, especially.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about
Yeah.
that.
And so I ended up spending my entire 4 years there. And I was so I was so
Oh,
disenchanted
oh, I would be
because I
too.
wanted to be an infantry marine. Like that was the deal.
Yeah.
Like I go do this for 2 years, then I go to the fleet and go do these other things. So I saw a lot of
Yes.
my buddies actually get, and I think it was just timing stuff,
Right, right.
but yeah, but I ended up there my entire career with the Marines, all 4 years, and so I got out.
Oh my god. I would too. I would
Yeah,
yeah, I would I don't know. I might take more
yeah, and,
drastic measures to get out sooner. Banger was a nightmare. Oof.
yeah. So and then I was out for like 3 months,
Mhm.
and I missed it like crazy.
Oh, for
Like
sure.
yeah, so one, I didn't have a plan for when I got out. Two, the camaraderie. Like even
Oh
though
yeah.
like being at Bangor for 4 years kind of sucked, like
Yeah.
the camaraderie I missed like crazy.
Oh, for
And
sure.
so I went to the local Marine Corps recruiter. I'm still living in the Bangor area at this time. And I talked to the Marine Corps recruiter and told him I wanted to get back in.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, no problem, but it's going to take like 6 months. Since the Marine Corps is smaller, there's not as many spots that can get filled. So I had to wait for things to open up.
Sure.
So I walk out of his office and the Army guy's next door and he's waving me in. So,
Of course, he's out there with semaphore
right.
flags.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, let's go see what this guy's got to say. So I walk into the Army recruiter's office and he's like, so you trying to join the Marines, huh? I was like, well, I'm trying to get back in the Marines. He's like, oh, you were already a Marine? I was like, yeah. He's like, what was your MOS? And infantry. He's like, oh, what'd he say? I was like, he said it's going to take 6 months. Army guy's like, I'll have you in 2 weeks.
Holy cow. Yeah. That's quick turnaround time.
uh, Off to the Army I went. 2 weeks later, I showed up at Fort Hood. I didn't even have a uniform yet. And
Well, yeah, because you didn't have to redo basic training. Did you?
Yeah, because yeah,
Yeah, I
because
mean you're
when you
yeah.
go from Marines to anywhere, you don't do basic training again. And then since I was staying the same MOS, I didn't have to get MOS trained. So
Wow. Well, that's a pretty sweet deal, but getting you uniforms, that'll come later. We'll figure it out.
yeah, so but it was kind of funny because I show up to reception at Fort Hood, and they're like, "You're supposed to be in uniform when you check in." And I was like, "I don't have uniforms yet." And they're like,
Yeah,
"Why
one of
don't
my
you have uniforms?" I was
yeah.
like, "Because I just came in from the Marines. Like they didn't give me any. They just didn't show up, so I did."
Yeah, yeah.
So then they were like, "Oh," so they took me with my little sheet over to the clothing and sales and walked around and got all my uniforms and
Wow. Now, did you get to keep your rank or what?
yep, kept my rank and everything. I mean, it was different. Like E4 in the Marines is like a solid NCO.
Yes.
Like and like you have a squad and E4 in the Army is
Yeah.
is it's like
Yeah.
it's the highest private rank.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you might have a few corporals. It's like if the army just wants you to hate your life,
Right.
Yeah. That is not part of the E4 mafia if you're a corporal, right? It's only
Yeah,
specialists. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is probably for the best at the time.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you kind of learn a little bit about the army, kind of how they operate, and then you're ready to be an NCO and move up to sergeant. But okay, so
Yeah,
you get settled in at Fort Hood, get your uniforms, and
yeah. It got assigned to 1-5 Cav. They were already in Iraq, so shortly after that, I went and joined them. And
wow. So I mean, time frame wise, you're at the recruiter's office versus you're joining your new unit overseas. What's the time frame? Like 2 months, 6 months?
yeah, so let's see. I show up at it was October 26th when I showed up at Fort Hood, and it was like mid-November ish.
Wow, that is that's a quick turnaround time. And so
Right.
I mean, basically, like what within a year, within probably what 8 months from going from Bangor to overseas with the army.
Yeah.
Wow, that is breakneck pace.
Right. Yeah. So cut the tail end of that. We came back for a year, and then we ramped up to go again.
Hmm.
It was supposed to be a year long deployment.
Yeah.
Um, this was October '06 when we were deploying now,
Hmm.
and that was during the surge.
Right.
And
Right.
so a year deployment turned into a year and a half.
Holy cow. I mean, cause well, I haven't been deployed, so I can't say for sure. I was stationed in Bahrain. Doesn't really count. It's like being stationed in Nevada. Eh. But I mean, the passage of a year over there versus here in the States, it's they're two they're two different universes. So I mean, what's people think okay, you went from 12 months to 18. It's like that's an incredible difference, and you probably don't find out until you're just about done with your 12 months, right? When did they tell you the bad news?
Oh, so we got that probably about 4 months in.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
still
but it was
after
kind
you
of
left, after
it
you
was
already
it was
got
a
there.
total bummer for me though because like I had so you get your 2 weeks during your deployment to come home for R&R,
Okay,
and
yeah,
I had mine like perfect like right in the middle of the deployment.
yeah,
Like
yeah, makes
yeah,
sense.
and now I was like, oh, this is gonna be a lot longer to go when I get back.
Holy cow, yeah, that's oh, that is brutal. Well, and it's back to back deployments too. Basically, you only had a year off before you're going off for what you think is only going to be another year only, and it turns
Yeah,
into 18 months. Oh my. I well yeah,
yeah,
and that's during the surge, and it's not like you have with an all volunteer force just a surge in recruiting numbers. So that was kind of a method to keep personnel numbers up over there. Holy
right.
18
Yeah,
months.
and so yeah, and that deployment, I think that was was our most brutal deployment,
Oh, it has
was
to
that
be.
one. Um, Not just because of like the time, like, but like the casualties and everything during that
Oh
deployment.
my god. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wow.
we were just outside of Balad, kind of closer to Atalaya on a little company sized fob. It was just big enough for us.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and we were just, the op tempo was high. We were running missions a lot and getting a lot of firefights.
Oh man.
Um, so yeah, like the coming into this deployment, like my faith journey is like a big part of my life too. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't tell my story without talking about that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it was, I would say, a little before this deployment where I really like discovered God in my life, and it became a real thing to me. And
Yeah.
it really played a big role on this particular deployment with one soldier in particular.
Hmm.
Um, so I going on this deployment, I'm a squad leader now. I'm an E5 sergeant, and I had so I was in weapons squad, the machine guns.
Hmm.
We had two machine gun teams, and so I had a soldier. His name was Raiderstorff. We just called him Raider.
Got to keep it short.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So Raider, his dad was a pastor at a church in Arizona,
Oh,
and
interesting.
Raider was like your stereotypical pastor's kid, where he wanted nothing to do with church and God and was like going complete opposite direction, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so he's assigned to me, like the newly found, like super strong faith guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect fit for everybody.
Right. Yeah. And so, um, you know, there, and one of the things about deployments in comedy, I'm sure you know this, like even though it's like busy and it's a high op tempo, there's a lot of just like downtime too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I do remember before it got bitterly cold at night was the sunsets were spectacular in Iraq.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I
But
guess.
then the sunset ended and it got really cold. Like,
Yeah. People don't realize that. Yeah.
yeah. And that sucks. Like you go from like hot to like cold, like fast. It just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But
That's
I
desert
love
for
the
you.
sunsets. And so a lot of times we'd sit out on top of our Bradleys. Um, and I guess, I don't know what your audience is. Is it mostly military on your audience, or
Pretty varied among the dozen or so people who listen.
the dozen or so?
It's probably fellow veterans, a lot of people, and yeah, people with some
Okay,
frame
well,
of
if you
reference.
don't know what a Bradley is, it's like a miniature tank.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I remember we'd sit on top of the Bradleys and watch the sunsets and just talk sometimes. And one night, me and Raider were sitting on top of the Bradleys talking. Me and Raider had a lot of deep conversations about faith, like and where I was, where he was,
Oh, that's great.
and yeah, and we had one of those conversations that night, and I felt God like speak to me afterwards, and it was just like, before we leave Iraq, he's gonna know me. And I was so certain I heard God say this to me. I went and called his dad and told his dad that.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful moment. I mean, because
Yeah,
you're kind of getting into it more. I don't want to say like, well, you don't have like an end goal in mind. Why exactly? This is why I'm having this conversation. It's kind of to understand where he is. Just it's very general
yeah,
thing, and gain empathy for his point of view, and vice versa. And then all of a sudden, a light goes off. That's pretty
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. So I have that conversation with dad. I told his dad that, and I don't know whether dad believed me or not, but
Yeah, skepticism
but
even
then
from the others of similar faith. Yes.
yeah, but then a couple months into the deployment from there, it was January 2007. Um, big big firefight, and with leaving a lot of the personal details of this out. Raider got shot in the chest twice,
Oh,
and He was alive when he was medevaced off the field and died on the operating table at Anaconda a couple hours later.
Oh man. Oh, it's
And I
so
remember
terrible.
just feeling like so let down and defeated by God. I was like,
Yeah.
I thought you told me he was going to know you, and now, he's gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so that was on top of losing like one of my soldiers. Like that was
Yeah.
made it extra difficult for me to deal with at the time.
Oh, absolutely.
But like being in Iraq and being high op tempo and being infantry, like you don't have a whole lot of time to like
Right. Right.
grieve and mourn, and so you got to take that shortly after, bury it, and start rolling missions again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But it was a couple weeks after that. Another one of my soldiers who had hurt his ankle doing dumb soldier things.
it's a lot of injuries come from dumb soldier things, more than you might
Right.
expect.
Right. So he had to get cleared to roll out on missions again.
Hmm.
And so we're on this like little company size base. So we got to go to Anaconda for him to see a doctor.
Okay.
And so we're at Anaconda waiting for him to get checked out and cleared. And I start talking to this flight surgeon who's standing there in the hall. So it turns out this is the flight surgeon that had worked on Raider.
Wow.
And I asked him if there was anything that Raider had said that we could pass on to the family or anything like that afterwards.
Yeah.
Um, and he said, yeah, it was the craziest thing. He said he was trach, shouldn't have been able to talk well. He was kind of not all there all the time, like with consciousness.
Yeah.
But he said when he was awake and alert, the one thing he kept saying is, "Tell Mike I know God."
Oh
And
man.
there's no way this flight surgeon knows my first name is Mike because it says Cumming on my,
Yeah. Yeah. It,
yeah.
that's it.
And so yeah, and so that like
Wow.
rocked me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's insane. That. Yeah. That's no coincidence. That's
Yeah,
that's
and
something
so
much bigger.
yeah, so then I was like super stoked about this. I was like, I gotta call his dad.
Yeah. 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 That's
So
huge.
by the time we get back to the base and we get a chance, I call his dad, and his dad tells me that he was having a hard time dealing with everything,
Oh,
and
of
he had
course.
and the moment I called him, he was sitting in his office praying, and he had told God that he needed something more. He needed Sergeant Cumming to call him, and that was right when I called him.
Oh man.
So
That's just crazy timing. Just again, can't be a coincidence. Just
right,
can't.
yeah.
Oh
So
man.
yeah, so that was fairly early on in that deployment. Continued on. We lost some more guys throughout the deployment. We got blown up a couple times that year, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
It's not not an easy place to easy place to be. You're not facing regular forces. I mean, you know, a lot of people hear stories about IEDs. People, veterans are not, they can't look at trash on the side of the road even now. Back in the states, I mean, was that the
yeah.
type of
I
missions you guys were
remember
running?
when we came home from that, because one of the things they would do is like burn tires
Yes.
over the road to make it look like asphalt where they had buried an IED in the road. And
Yes.
so I'd come home from that deployment, and we took our 30 days of leave, and we drove out to Arizona to visit Raider's parents, and then from there we took the kids, because I had two kids by now. Um,
Yep.
they were both really young still.
Hmm.
But then we took the kids to Disneyland from Arizona,
Very
and
nice.
I remember driving out of Phoenix, and a semi truck farther up the road had like blown a tire like recently,
Ooh.
and so that burnt rubber smell was in the air.
Yeah.
And I remember like flipping out, like looking around, like trying to find. And then we came up on the semi truck, and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
it."
This is a normal thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, Yeah, because it's it's something that you have to be very conscious of while you're there, and then in order to stay alive and keep up with the tempo, that goes straight to your subconscious, and then you kind of almost
Yeah.
your conscious kind of forgets about it down there until something like that happens back in the States. Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Oof. So I mean, you guys ran a lot of missions like that. I mean, you mentioned Bradley fighting vehicles earlier. I mean, you're out on missions with those. I mean, are you knocking down doors? What were some of the
Yeah.
types of
Yeah.
missions that
We
you were
were
doing?
we were door to door. We did a lot of air inserts. We did surprisingly 4 amphibious assaults in Iraq off the Tigris River on Zodiacs.
People don't think
Uh,
about that.
right.
Wow,
Yeah. And
amphibious.
I will tell you, like being in the middle of the Tigris River on a Zodiac boat is the most vulnerable place I've ever felt. Like they,
Interesting.
yeah, you're just out in the middle of a river on a boat. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
how
That's a
easy it is
problem.
to pick that silhouette out.
Seems like you probably wouldn't even have to be all that good of an aim. I mean, you could probably skip bullets off the top of the surface of the water, right?
Right.
At least
Yeah.
pop the boat and make everybody swim. Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
That's rough. Now, when you're the 4 amphibious assaults, was that, I assume, nighttime, or were they
Yeah. They were
silly
all at
enough?
night.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
They weren't
Yeah.
silly enough to
Almost
make you
drowned
do
in the
it.
Tigris River on one of those.
Oh,
So we so we hit the beach and everyone jumped off and I jumped out and I've got 100 pounds of body armor and
yeah, you ain't
camo and
swimming in that.
weapon. Right. And so it was deeper where I jumped out than I realized.
Oh
And so
no.
I just like sunk, but I had reached up and grabbed like a rope on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Zodiac and was like hanging onto that. Well, I kind of got pulled back in a bit. So
Thank God. I mean, I remember one time I was in a pool and properly attired for swimming. I had fins on and I tried to tread water holding a 45-pound plate. It's like, no, you can't do it. Like,
yeah.
you could be, if you're really good, at least, not, well, maybe not really good. Maybe you would be able to do it. But I was a pretty strong swimmer, and it was like, I needed a buddy to, like, hold my swim trunks to hold me up so I could breathe. So, I mean, a
Yeah.
100 pounds and you're wearing boots, so not flippers, you're screwed.
Right.
You better hope that there's someone there to pull you up or you grab a rope. Good,
Yeah.
got lucky
Yeah.
there.
And the Tigris is just good. Like I don't want to drown the way I die anyway, because it seems like it would suck. But I
Yeah.
especially don't want to drown in the Tigris. That river is so gross.
I yeah, just any river in the Middle East, like, oh, that's ew. Like it just never conjures up images of anything nice or pure. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
sounds like you know, what is it? The I can't even think of it now. It was something down on our border. Some dirty river that people catch diseases from crossing.
Right.
Uh, well,
Yeah. So yeah, so
glad you.
this yeah, so we came back from that. We were home for a year and went again.
On third
Uh,
deployment.
the third deployment, this one was a year long. It was in Mosul.
Oh, jeez.
And this was so each one was so different. Like, the first one is more like the invasion type. Second one was during the surge, a lot of standing firefights,
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of chasing high value targets and knocking indoors. The third one was when we had started to some I guess try and transition.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but we weren't combat troops anymore. We were aid and assist. Like we're still the same infantry unit that was there a year ago,
Well,
but
yeah.
now we're aid and assist.
That is very odd, and especially because they'll talk about units training up other units to deploy. Like, okay, these are lessons learned. Like, this is how you have to do things, or forget about this how you were trained because this is what it is now, and it's just what you're learning is so quickly obsolete, and your
Yeah,
rules are changing so rapidly through the same damn war. Unbelievable.
yeah, So same infantry guys, but different title to what we're doing. But with it came new rules of engagement. Like we couldn't bring the
Oh,
tracked vehicle. couldn't bring the tracked vehicles into the cities anymore.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, we had to let the Iraqi army know when and where we were patrolling because we were supposed to be like training them up to take over. Well, half of them are corrupt, so
Yeah.
so the standing firefights became less of a thing, and it was more IEDs, RPGs, grenades off of rooftops into the hatches on vehicles, and
Oh
just
man.
just felt like we just got pummeled.
Oh yeah, you're just there as a giant bullet magnet, and
Yeah, and we lost our battalion commander
mm,
to a vehicle IED during that deployment, and that was the he was the highest ranking casualty of the Iraq War to that at that point.
wow,
Yeah, it,
what a
it was
waste.
massive, dude. Like just yeah, uh,
Unbelievable.
yeah. So we were there for a year. I remember I was getting ready to get on the plane to come home from Iraq when the Fort Hood shooting happened.
Oh, that's right. Oh my. And you're still
Yeah,
stationed out of Fort Hood at this point. I mean,
yeah,
obviously you haven't changed units, so
right.
wow.
So we missed, and that was in the SRP center. You know where you like go to like come go to all
Yeah.
the stations when you come back. And
Oh
so
my.
I mean we missed being in that by days.
Yeah. Yeah. Just nothing.
Yeah, and when we came back, it was still a crime scene, and they didn't really know what to do with us. So,
Great.
so
uh, good
yeah,
old army.
yeah, and it was after that deployment where I really started to crack a little bit with some PTSD stuff.
I mean, how could you? Maybe this is an inappropriate question, but how could you not? I mean, that type of tempo, and even going back, there's no, as you said, everything changed every single time you went back. So there's not even
Yeah,
like the stability of the war that you're expecting. I
yeah,
mean, that's a lot for any one person to deal with.
yeah. So yeah, and so I made some poor decisions. Nothing that was like gonna get me in trouble or anything. They're just poor decisions,
I
like with
smart.
life and yeah. Anyway, decided at this point like I can't keep up with this tempo.
Yeah,
So I decided to transition to the reserves because I didn't want to throw away 12 years.
right. Smart.
Uh, so so I transitioned to the Army Reserves and changed my MOS to Civil Affairs, which is not what everyone thinks it is when they hear the name of it.
I briefly thought engineering. I know that's totally wrong. So describe what civil affairs is for the uninitiated.
So civil, yeah. So I don't. Most people hear Civil Affairs and they think public affairs.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Precisely.
but civil affairs is a lot of like non-lethal targeting stuff. Like, so you're really like doing area assessments, learning the culture of the people and things like that, so that you can like,
Okay.
tell the ground commander like, look, these are some things you might not want to do because you're going to piss the people off, and these are
Right.
and so you're doing that kind of advising. You're doing humanitarian aid relief.
Hmm.
Um, and then you're doing a lot of information gathering too.
Yeah.
Like we'd go on into countries and just walk around and talk to people and get information.
Hmm.
Um, and then they had no idea that's what we were doing. Yeah, and
Crafty.
then like civil affairs, like in a combat environment, like you're still attached to the infantry, rolling out with them on their missions.
Hmm.
But while the infantry's kicking indoors, like you're having a meeting with the sheik, and they, oh, you need this? Well, we'll build you a school, but you're going to have to do this and this and this for us, and
Yeah.
kind of negotiating some of that stuff and finding out some of that stuff to like brief to the commander, like this is
Okay.
what they want in the village, or and then the commander can decide if it's something they're going to support or not. But
Okay. Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, that's way different than what I was expecting. So it's, yeah, like you say, negotiating. That sounds kind of like a more militaristic version of sales. I would not be good at that. How, how
Yeah, so
did
it
you
was a lot
like
of
it?
fun.
Oh, you did. Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
It's a good
yeah,
change
it
then.
was a lot of fun. And it was because I did, yeah, I think my other options at the time when I was going in reserves was I could be a mechanic, a
Mm.
cook, like
Yeah, all the
things I didn't
like.
want to do.
Wow, I really
I was
didn't
like,
like any of this crap.
I was
Yeah.
like, well, civil affairs, it still rolls out with the infantry, so it's like I felt like it was still like same ballpark arena. Like I'm still
Yeah.
on the ground doing things and rolling out on missions, and that's what I wanted. But
That man, you found a good one. I mean, how much did you have in the way of choice of going, changing MOSs or anything?
yeah, so I
Was
didn't have a ton because how as you go up in rank and then the spots, yeah.
Yep.
So, but civil affairs, I think you had to be you either had to be E5 or E6 to transition into it from
Okay.
active military.
Makes sense. Yeah, you don't want to
Yeah,
just put buck privates in there negotiating with people. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
yeah. The interesting thing though is like if you just join the reserves, like out of high school, you can join civil affairs. But if you're coming to civil affairs from anywhere else, you have to be a certain rank,
Makes sense to me.
right? Yeah, I don't know.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So anyway, yeah. So civil affairs, was the obvious choice out of the options I had, and it was a good one for me. It fit me well.
Oh, that's good.
Uh, yeah. So that brought me up to Utah in 2011.
All right.
Um,
What made you decide on Utah? Just that's where the reserves took you, or that's where you wanted to go to school?
so I'd already decided on Utah. Well, that was another thing too. So I'd already decided I wanted to go to the school at the University of Utah. Um,
All right.
and then I went to see what was available in Utah for the reserves.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what led me to the University of Utah is as we're getting ready to make this transition off active duty,
Hmm.
um, I was looking at different schools and some of the programs, trying to figure out like what it was I wanted to do.
That's a big question.
Someone had mentioned the National Outdoor Leadership School to me in Lander, Wyoming.
Hmm.
And so I looked them up to see what they were all about. And then I learned that they were affiliated with the University of Utah,
Oh.
which got me to look over University of Utah way. And it's like, oh, like University of Utah is the only school that like works both ways with National Outdoor Leadership School. So Knowles, the National Outdoor Leadership School, is like the premier adventure outdoor school in the country.
Oh, okay. Amazing.
And so half of the professors in the adventure and outdoor program department at the University of Utah were also Knowles instructors.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so University of Utah is hands down the best program in the country for outdoor professional stuff.
Okay. That,
And so that's
there
why I
you go.
picked the University of Utah.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Right.
Go be a
Yeah.
leader in the field.
Yeah. So best choice I could have ever made on a major. So
Well, of course. Yeah. You don't have to do hours in a lab or write
yeah, like
stupid
half of my
papers.
classes were outside. I remember my big final for my bachelor's degree was a 7-day backpacking trip in the Uintas that we all led part of and taught classes on and like
Amazing. What a
right.
what a great program.
I know it
Genius.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
it's like deciding to become a PE teacher but like fun.
right.
And cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. The only downside to it is if you want to actually work in that field professionally,
Yeah, that might be tough.
if you're a single dude or a young 20s, it's great. If you have a wife and kids,
It's another story. Yeah.
it's really hard unless you like own a company.
Yes, yes. I
Because
can imagine.
guiding doesn't have like any like benefits like medical or anything like that to cover anybody. Like
No.
it's the pay is here and there and
I worked for a rafting company when I was still in high school, and I went to their guide school. I was like, oh, maybe I could pick up like a few things as like a river guide, and like I finished the training, and I was like, wait, you guys are gonna pay how much? Never mind. And I was 17. Like the money
Yeah,
wasn't enough.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a thankless, payless job because you get to be outside, I guess.
yeah. But I had a blast going to school.
That's great.
Uh, yeah, so finished my bachelor's degree, and then I was like, I'll just do a master's now in the same program. So I
Why
applied for
not?
the master's program at the University of Utah and got in, and then continued with that. Because
Perfect.
I had more time on my GI Bill, so I was like, I might as well use it.
Yeah, exactly. Get that sweet whatever it was, like $1,400 a month BAH.
Yeah, yeah. But during my time at the university, and so the back the story up because it's kind of an important part of the story. So when
Hmm.
I remember distinctly the day I drove off of Fort Hood for the last time
Oh yeah, that's a weird
was
feeling.
like, even though I had like my kids and my wife, we were all together in the car. It was the loneliest feeling of my life.
Really?
Yeah,
Cause
I
you,
was just like, I was leaving like the whole world I knew, everybody that could relate to anything I'd been through
yeah,
behind. And now all of a sudden, like it's just gone. Like
yeah,
there's nobody that like actually understands like what any of those deployments was like. Like,
yeah.
and yeah, and that was when I really like started to like crumble with like PTSD symptoms. It
Yeah.
was after I left the active duty world. And I think that is a more common thing among veterans than people realize is when you're
Oh yeah.
while you're still on active duty, at least you have like this community, this brotherhood, these guys that
Yeah.
even if they didn't go through the same experiences, like
Hmm.
they understand
Yes.
what it's like, the like you can relate to each other.
Yeah.
And when you leave that, you lose that community.
Hmm.
And like our world today is so isolating and polarizing that
Oh
nobody
yes.
wants nobody wants to understand it, nobody
Hmm.
wants to be bothered by it, nobody wants to hear about the war.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, you just deal with it on your own.
Well, yeah, it's and yeah, nobody wants to hear about the war. Some people don't even really understand like the war is still going on or anything like that. Like I
Yeah,
swear there are people watching the, Afghanistan a year and a half ago going, we were still over there? It's like,
right.
yes. Yes, we are
Yeah,
still over there. Yeah, and you're right. Just in every day, it's not just isolated to the veteran community, but just people have a less and less interest in really learning and getting to know other people. It's just all, like you say, it's just all isolated. So yeah, it's understanding of veterans is getting worse and worse and worse as the years go on.
yeah, yeah. So I start crumbling PTSD wise and just mentally. And yeah, and so it cost me my family.
Oh
um
man.
and I don't blame her at all. She'd been through a lot through our 10 years of active duty and multiple deployments.
Oh, for
The
sure.
stuff I put her through, like just not handling things well, and then
Yeah.
crumbling, and like I get it. Like
Yeah.
there's only so much you can take. Like, and we
Yeah.
and so me and the mother of my kids, we're great friends today and co-parent really well. Um,
Thank.
yeah, yeah. And so like I can hang out with her and her husband and all the kids, and it's not weird, and we all get
Good.
along.
Good.
Um, but it ran its course. I was in a terrible place.
Yeah.
It was Memorial Day 2012
Hmm.
when I was escorted by the police to the VA hospital in Salt Lake and held on a psych hold,
Oh man.
because everybody was absolutely certain I was going to become one of the statistics.
I
And
thank
I
God that
wish
you
I could
had people that
say,
were looking out for you. I mean,
Yeah, but I wish I could say that was when I started to get better, but it wasn't. It was just I got better at hiding things.
yeah, yeah, you kind of, that's your primary. Yeah, in a lot of cases, that is kind of the primary response. Like, I just can't have this happen again. That's really what you're thinking about. Big picture
Yeah,
is not going to happen yet.
yeah. Because I mean, I'm still in the military as a reservist,
Hmm.
which was also that was a culture shock too. Was to go from
Oh
the
my,
active duty
yeah,
world to the reserves, where you have people that you know it's only ever been a part-time job,
yes,
and they don't understand like the magnitude of like how important it is to like take the time you have there and train because that you only get so much time to get good at what you're supposed to be good at. And
yep,
if you have to go over there, you have to be proficient.
yeah,
And
totally
so to
foreign
get that through,
concept.
right. So to try and get this through some of these kids' heads was like,
Yeah, what are you doing? Oh,
yeah. Um,
so
but
difficult.
I adapted to it over time.
Yeah, give it time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
I
but
understand.
so from Memorial Day 2012 to it was around. Well, okay, so yeah, Memorial Day 2012, and then I started my internship for my degree program in August of 2012.
Okay.
And I had found my love for rock climbing at this point in time.
Yes.
And so I did my internship with a local guide company that I'd done a lot of work with,
Hmm.
thinking it was just going to take people climbing, it was going to be easy internship, right? And just
Yeah.
check the box. And so, first day of the internship, one of the owners of the guide company, his name's Nick, he pulls me aside. He's like, "So, what do you want to do while you're here?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, you're not just going to take people climbing. You know how to do that. Like, let's
Yeah.
do something while you're here doing this." And I was like, "Maybe we could make a veterans climbing program. It helped me a lot." And he's like,
Yeah.
"Let's do it." So,
Oh,
Operation
amazing.
Climb On was born.
Oh, that awesome. I
Yeah.
remember that.
So we started Operation Climb On, and it became very successful immediately.
Hmm.
A lot of that was the Veteran Support Center at the University of Utah helped push it.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a one-stop marketing agency.
Right.
Yeah.
um, yeah, but once we got it going, it just kept rolling, and helping other vets through climbing helped me a lot in my own journey.
Yeah.
But I was still struggling and dealing with a lot at that point. And it was
Oh, for sure.
right around the right around Veterans Day of 2012
Hmm.
when our friend Roger Perkins
Hmm.
talked me into talking to a VA counselor one time. I agreed to go one time.
Yeah.
And so that one time turned into another time, which turned into another time, and turned into the next 6 years of counseling.
Oh man, but good. Good on Roger. He is like the king of get him to agree one time, and then it'll work itself out from there. Because he would,
Yeah.
when you became a new student, he would send. It was an automated email that I'm sure his work study sent out, but it was like, "Come by for a cup of coffee." I'm like, "I like coffee," and that was like a Roach Motel, and I was just like stuck in the Veteran Support Center, which is not a bad thing,
Yeah.
and you get it's everything you need. So yeah, they get you through the door, and then everything seems to take care of itself from there. But that's great that he got you to
Yeah.
go.
And yeah, so my journey back started then. And it was a combination of Operation Climb On and
Hmm.
like having a purpose, helping other veterans and actually like putting in some really hard work with therapy
Yeah,
for 6 years.
for sure.
Um, and then uh, having that community with some of the other vets that were came along as instructors of the Operation Climb On program with me.
Yeah.
It was like my new little tribe there.
Yeah. You've built your newest team. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Um, yeah. So that we had that going on, and then somewhere in there, I met my next wife,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and that was a challenge.
Now, was she also a student? I now I'm
No,
not
no,
recollecting. Okay. Okay.
no, but she was in the Salt Lake area. So we got married, and then she had developed an addiction to opioids
Oh, yeah. Okay.
from some medical conditions she had,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very
and
common
and
sad
it just
thing.
got pretty bad. Like it was like, and I was over it. Um, and so I remember in the beginning of October of, let's see, it was 9 years ago. So that would have been what year?
2014 was 9 years ago. Uh, because I didn't.
Whatever year that is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's
It
2013.
doesn't matter. It
So
was nine
yeah,
years ago.
got it. Okay.
Actually, yeah. Was it nine? Whatever. Long enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So I interviewed for what seemed like a dream job for me,
Mm-hmm.
which was going to be working for the Department of the Army as a civilian in Alaska, running all of the outdoor recreation programs for the soldiers stationed there.
Oh, amazing.
Right. Yeah. So like
Gotta
taking them
love it.
fishing, climbing, skiing, whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Your
Yeah. So
wheelhouse.
like dream job for me. Uh,
Sure.
yeah. So I interviewed for it. And I remember talking to the kids and their mom about it, and they were like, "Well, what are you gonna do if you get it?" It's like, "I'm just gonna go to Alaska." And she's like, "That's great. The kids can come up and spend summer in Alaska. That'd be awesome. We'll figure out visitation. Like everybody's on board." And then she's like, "What are you gonna do with your wife?" I was like, "I'm just leaving her here."
It's yeah. Why not? What is she gonna
Right.
do? Come to Alaska? Come on now.
Yeah.
Think it through. Wow.
Yeah. Because I'm over the addiction thing. Like it's yeah.
Yeah, it's
But
tough to deal with.
it wasn't very long after that interview. Um, she had gone and picked up her daughter from daycare. She had a 2-year-old daughter
Mm-hmm.
from daycare, and then was driving home
Mm-hmm.
and had a massive seizure and got in a massive car accident.
Oh man.
And her daughter was in a coma for a bit.
Oh god. 2 year
Yeah.
old in a
And
coma.
yeah, and quadriplegic
Oh.
on life support.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, I didn't feel like I could just up and leave.
No, no. That changes
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. And so it was literally 3 days after the accident, Alaska called and offered me the job.
Oh.
And I said, I can't do it. I,
Yeah.
I don't know what, you know, the future looks like now after
Oh
this.
yeah.
And they're like, well, what if we hold it for 6 months? And I was like, I can't have you hold a job for 6 months and then I still can't take it. I don't
Yeah.
know what the next 6 months looks like anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Who
and
could?
so
It's
turned down
impossible.
my dream job
Mm. Ugh.
and stayed and took care of them. So she came out of the coma. She woke up.
Mm.
She did have some brain damage and
Oh,
stuff, but you know, she more or less got better as much as she could.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but she required 24-hour respiratory care,
Holy
uh,
cow.
and so when she was able, they moved her from primary children's to an assisted living facility,
Mm-hmm.
and she lived there. And then I just ended up having to take care of the wife now because she can't drive anymore, and
Oh yeah.
guilt from the
Yeah.
accident, and she just spiraled further
Yeah.
down the drain.
That's not something that you bounce back from. I mean,
Yeah,
even
yeah, and so like I know, like uh, from dealing with my own demons that you
mhm.
know her drinking and increased drug usage and cheating and things like that is all just trying to numb the pain. And
Oh
so I'm
yeah.
not taking it personally, even
But
though
you're a
even though it
person.
does still feel personal. But
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
but I'm sticking through it because I'm like I know that's what this is.
Yes. Yes.
And so I stuck through it as long as I could, which was like another couple years. And finally, I just had to draw a line in the sand and
Yeah.
cut my losses.
How much can you put up with? I mean,
Yeah,
there's that is an amazing honorable desire to want to save someone, but at what cost to you? You're still a person,
right.
you know?
And what I realized later on was in a way I didn't I wasn't intending to be, but I was enabling her to do that by taking care of her.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
so after I was out of the picture, I don't know how much more she spiraled, but she hit a point where she got herself completely sober and was like
Wow.
super involved with taking care of her daughter again and got everything figured out. And yeah,
I I mean that's amazing because well, this probably comes with the territory of people being isolated from one another, but a lot of times, from the outside looking in to someone else's problems, you think, okay, well, you do this, 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 and this. But what you're describing for her is like, I wouldn't even know where to start. I mean, that's incomprehensible
yeah,
to me. So that she ever saw any improvement is really incredible. Good
yeah,
for her. Good for her. But
yeah. So,
wow.
but that I was the only father figure ever in that child's life. So like I always consider her my kid and
Mhm.
continued to go visit her even after that relationship ended and
Mhm.
stayed involved. She just passed away back in November.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, how
But
terrible.
we got 7 more years with her than we thought we were going to. So
That's yeah. That's that's quite a lot. Oh my god, I'm so
yeah,
sorry, Mike.
yeah. And I guess I should back up. Like when I really started having my PTSD issues and my family fell apart and everything, I bought into this lie that I had screwed up my life too much to ever be used by God again. And so I kind of walked away from my faith during this time as well.
Mhm.
Always believed in God. Like there was no doubt. Like I had that moment with Raider that forever made me know there's a God. I bought into like I
Yeah.
can't be used anymore. I've messed up too much. So why even try?
Right, right. Yeah, there's with with that much going on, I mean, developing a defeatist attitude, I mean, for lack of a better term, I mean, it almost just comes with the territory. It's just you can't see the light at the bottom of the hole that you're in.
Yeah, yeah. So then, um, you know, I I worked my way back to a healthy place, PTSD wise, more or less. Um, but I was pretty much a shell of myself emotionally
Mhm.
around the end of 2019. And then I came back home to Washington in January 2020 to visit right before COVID happened.
What an opportune time.
Yeah. And when I was back home visiting my mom and my brother, I just really felt like I needed to be back here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I went back to Utah and I went and talked to my kids and their mom. And I was like, if I go back up to Washington and just kind of start over, like, what do you guys think? And all of them are like, if you can go start over in Washington, you need to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so having their blessing and support
Good. What a
meant
great
everything because
family.
I wasn't going to do it otherwise.
Yeah. What a great family.
Uh, yeah. So then I started looking at transferring my because by this time I'm working at the VA now also,
Right. Right.
um, which was another great reason. great thing for choosing adventure and outdoor programs, because the VA only cares that you have a degree, not in what it's in.
Gotta love government work, right?
Right. So it's like this. I played during college and still got a job. So
Yes. Well done. Well done. You
yes.
cracked the code, Mike.
Yeah. So I moved my job from the VA up to Seattle office, and transferred to a unit up here for the reserves,
Perfect.
and moved back to Washington in June 2020, like mid full on COVID and riots in the streets of Seattle.
Uh, Beautiful.
Right. That was the opportune time to come back here.
Oh yeah.
Actually, I think it was God's timing and really good for me to come during that.
Yeah.
So I ended up renting one of the extra rooms at my mom's house, because I didn't know where I wanted to like settle in.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't really know until
And
you physically get there anyway. A lot of
yeah,
times.
and so I was like, well, that helps her, pay some of her bills, and
Sure.
helps me because I'm not paying like stupid amount of rent, and I'm not locked into anything, and I
Yeah.
can take my time and figure out where I want to actually be.
100%.
Yeah, so it was super convenient. And
Good.
so I moved back up here with my dog, and um, spent probably the next 6 months of weekends just me and my dog up in the mountains in Washington by ourselves,
Oh, that's
and
amazing.
really just got a lot of like rest for the soul and healing and time
Yeah.
with God up in the mountains. And it was just, I think it was just what we needed. Like, I wasn't going to church or anything. I was just going up in the mountains, and that's where I was finding God.
Yeah.
And so my brother that lives up here, he's a pastor on staff at one of the local churches. And I wouldn't even go to his church unless he was speaking. That was the only time I went to church, was when my brother was speaking. He's a phenomenal speaker.
Oh yeah.
Love listening to the guy.
Amazing. Older or
Um,
younger brother?
Younger, like
Okay.
3 years younger. Yeah.
Oh, not much then. Okay.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
we're pretty close in age. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And so I love hearing him speak. So I'd go when he'd speak, but otherwise I told him, I was like, no,
Yeah.
mountains are my church now.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
priorities. I keep
Yeah.
it simple.
I'd only go to church when my brother would speak, because I loved hearing him.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like I would always tell him the mountains is my church. So
Yeah. That's well, and that's the biggest thing. It's not just the act of going somewhere, of going to church. It's, I mean, if you're not feeling the presence of God,
right.
you're kind of just going through the motions.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm kind of like jaded towards it at this point now too. So
I hear you there. I'm a Catholic, but I haven't been to church in a while because at some point I just feel like the money that I'm putting in the collection plate is aiding and abetting at this point. It's like
yeah.
I don't feel God. My money's going down the drain or being used for something not good. I don't know. So I hear you.
Yeah. So yeah, so it was December of 2020 now. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and this is probably the second time in my life I've really like felt like God like really spoke to me, and like I just knew it. Like,
Yeah.
first time was Raider, and now this time. And he just kind of told me, like, gave me my identity again. He said, you're a warrior, you're wounded, you're in this place right now where nobody knows where you are unless you want them to know. And this is your time to just heal and recover and find me again. And then eventually you'll step back into the arena. And
Interesting. Especially
yeah.
that last
And
part.
so, yeah. So then I told my brother about it, and he's like, you need to write that down. I was like, okay. So I wrote it down. So that's why I still remember it, because I wrote it down.
Brother's a smart man. Good
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah. So then we'll fast forward a few months, and it was probably March of 21, or yeah, 21 now.
Mhm.
And something inside me is like, go try a church out. And I was like, and so at this point in my life, like, I'm like making deals with God.
Mhm.
And I was like, I'll go try a church for a month.
This is your civil affairs taking the lead.
Right. Yeah, negotiating with God. Yeah.
Okay, that works.
So I was like, I'll go try church for a month. And if I don't like it, I'm not going back ever.
There you
Unless
go.
Kevin's speaking, my brother.
Of course. There's always that
Right.
caveat.
Yeah. And so I went to this church for a month. I wasn't feeling it. And then I went and had lunch with a friend and I was telling them I tried church for a month, wasn't feeling it, probably done with it. And my friend's like, yeah, but you only tried one church.
Ah, yes.
And I was like, yeah. And they're like, there's a lot of churches out there.
Tons. Yeah.
And I was like, fine, I'll try one more. So I go to this church called Venture Church,
All
just because I
right.
thought the name sounded cool and it was close to my house.
Yeah. Venture,
And
adventure. Yeah,
right, yeah.
could
And
work.
so the and that looking back on this, like I can see, like I'm looking at this point in my life, I was looking for reasons not to go. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so I go and I listen, and the preacher, she did great. Except I didn't like the story that she opened it up with.
Hmm.
And I just thought it was dumb. And
What was the story?
I don't even remember. Yeah. And it wasn't like there was anything wrong or anything. I didn't think it was, I just thought it was a dumb story.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then that day I was having lunch at my brother's house. So I went up there and I was telling him about it, and he's like, "Oh, did you meet this guy? Me and him used to do youth camps together back when we were youth pastors." And I was like, "No, but I saw him on the screen like doing an announcement thing, and they had a video of him." And he's like, "Oh, you got to meet him. You'll love that guy." And I was like, "Well, I'm not going back." And he's like, "He's like, why?" And so I told him about this story, and he's like, "Wait, that's the only reason you're not going back?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "You need to go one more time."
Oh boy. They don't let you quit.
Fine. Yeah. So I went one more time, and Pastor Brandon, the senior pastor of the church, spoke that Sunday morning,
Okay.
and I was hooked. Like
Yeah.
I'd never heard anyone speak like he did before, and like
Oh wow.
yeah, and I was like, oh, maybe this is my place.
Yeah. Amazing.
So next thing I know, like I've been a regular attender at Venture Church ever since, and then
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow.
yeah,
Going
and
strong on
then
3 years now. Plus.
yeah, yeah, and then we'll fast forward to February of 22.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So anybody who knows me well knows like I'm a diehard baseball guy. Like I go to college baseball. Like if I'm driving by and there's little league games and I have nothing going on, I'll be the creepy guy sitting there watching little leaguers play that aren't my kids.
Eh, that's all right. I'm sure they're glad to have the audience.
Yeah. Like, I love Major League Baseball,
Yeah.
baseball. Love baseball. So college baseball starts first every year. And
Yeah.
so it was February, and I was going to a cold February baseball game at the University of Washington.
Perfect.
And it happened to be Little League Day. And so, like, every Little League team was there, like, and it was just packed with Little Leaguers.
Of course.
Yeah. And I went to get in line to get a hot dog, and it was like ridiculously long. And I wouldn't have stayed in the line except like I got in the line and I turned around, and one of the pastors from Venture Church walked up right behind me.
Of all places.
Right. And so this guy, I've met him like a couple of times. Like we know who
Mhm.
each other are, but I don't know anything about him. He doesn't really know anything about me.
Right.
And so now we spend 45 minutes in the hot dog line.
Oh man, they need to
Well,
revamp their business model.
right. But I think it was meant to be because I spent
Right.
45 minutes there, and he was, asking me about my background, and I told him about my military and how ran Operation Climb On in Utah for 9 years,
Yeah.
and he was like, "Oh, so you still want to do something with vets?" And I was like, "I do." and I just don't know what it looks like right now. 'Cause
Hmm.
initially, I thought I was going to come up here and start another branch of Operation Climb On.
Yeah.
But then I realized that I don't have the climbing partners and the climbing resources and connections
Yeah.
in Washington like I had in Utah. And it was going to take a long time to develop that here. Like I had the luxury
For
of
sure.
going through a degree program in it at the University of Utah and making
Yep.
all kinds of connections right there then,
Yeah.
and getting local sponsors like Black Diamond, and
Yes.
yeah, and so I don't have all of that in Washington. And so I realized that Operation Climb On is not starting another chapter in Washington. And
Yes.
then I realized that I'm not going back to Utah, so I finally gave it up and stepped away
Hmm.
um, from the program,
Yeah.
and which was hard for me. Is that
Oh
I
yeah. It's
realized
your
also
baby.
that,
You started it.
yeah, it was my baby, but it also kind of become my identity too, which was a
Right.
problem.
Hmm. Yeah.
And because I identified myself as Operation Climb On, more or less, like,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I'm thinking at this point I'm going to do something adventure therapy again, but I just don't know what it looks like.
Right.
And so I'm talking to this pastor from Venture Church about all of this, and he's like, well, what if we started something at the church for vets? And I was like, maybe.
Okay.
So
I'm listening.
yeah. Yeah. So he's like, well, we got a leadership meeting tomorrow night. You should come to it. I was like, just like that? And
Yeah.
he's like, yeah,
It's not
come
like
talk about your heart for vets. And I was like, okay.
amazing.
So I showed up at this meeting the next night and started talking about my heart for vets, and we started talking about like maybe having just like a group for vets at the church. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking like small scale, right? Like I'm thinking
Sure.
like handful of vets at a coffee shop or a pub or something, not like
Yeah.
anything like
Start small.
major.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So next thing I know, like I have this encounter with God that like just totally wrecks me and like drastically changes the way I walk with him. Like where I'd been like
Amazing.
where I thought I was doing well for a long time because I was so much better than I had been during that 10 years where I was not walking in faith at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I realized was like I got better, and then I got complacent
Yes. Yes. You
and
just kind of.
comfortable with where I was, like and I was just comparing it to where I was, and I realized like I was not actually doing well. Like
Right. Right.
I was just
Well, you're not
yeah,
growing.
and
You're stagnating.
right. Yeah. And so that encounter just wrecked me with God, and just totally changed like everything in my life going
Yep.
forward from that point. And that
Mm.
was around April of 22 that happened.
Hmm.
So now all of a sudden, like this veterans thing has like just blown up on me without me even trying.
Amazing.
Right. Like we haven't launched it yet, and I'm thinking about like where we're gonna meet for this. And I was like, so I'm talking to that same pastor about it, and he's
Hmm.
like, well, there's nothing happening at so our church has a couple of campuses. He's
Okay.
like, there's nothing happening at the Everett campus on Wednesday night. And I was like, wait, like the whole building? He's like, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I was like, okay. So next thing I know, I've got keys and an alarm code for one of the church buildings.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
And
What a huge start.
right. And so we launched it officially May 22nd, 2022.
Amazing.
And it dawned on me a little bit later that because that was right before Memorial Day weekend of 22.
Oh, right. Right. Wow, what a huge
Yeah.
milestone.
And so it was almost exactly 10 years to the day that I had been escorted by the VA police, or by the police to the VA,
Wow.
to standing in front of a church of a couple thousand people and launching this veterans ministry.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. What a
And
long way to go.
Right. Yeah. And I can only say that it was through, having a community with other vets, that finding purpose again, the grace and healing that Jesus offered me, and yeah, having people like stand with me through it all.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah,
yeah.
just
Um,
amazing.
and so we launched Venture Vets May 22nd of 22, and we started a Facebook page for it. And then the format for it is we meet, well, we started doing Wednesday nights in Everett
Hmm.
for the first 2 months. And
Okay.
then we we'd grown enough that we moved to the church's main campus building in Mill Creek, Washington,
Wow.
and switched to Thursday nights.
Okay.
Yeah, and we started with the barbecue, and we had like, I think it was like 20, 25 people come to our first barbecue event, and I was stoked. I was like, man,
Oh yeah,
that's
it's a
that's a
lot of
good turnout
people.
for a first event.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that girl is busy.
And yeah, and then I think we started off like 5 or 6 vets showing up at first. And it was really cool is we have Vietnam through current generation vets.
Yes,
And they all, well, they've all their experiences are different. Like they all can relate to each other, and they
it is
all
amazing.
understand each other. And it's really cool to see.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and so that we're meeting weekly, and so the kind of the format is a short little like 15-minute lesson, and then we have discussion, and it's just it's been so cool to see this thing.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
and now it's
awesome.
it now coming up almost a year now, like in
Yeah,
May.
very close. That's
Yeah,
great.
now we've got about 20 regular vets on Thursday nights,
Wow.
and we've got 270 something in our online group.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's
That's
just
a ton of
yeah,
growth.
it's been incredible. We had a big veterans dinner in January.
Hmm.
They had a really cool speaker come. You should get him on your podcast.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely
Yeah,
open.
I'll tell you about him later offline. But
Sure, sure. Secret for now. Shh.
yeah, yeah. But we had 115 vets show up to the dinner
Wow.
in January. Yeah,
That's
it's just incredible to see this, and then to hear some of the stories of these guys.
yeah.
They I've got to hear them like tell stories they've never told before, and just see them grow and come to life and heal through this. Like we got one guy, he's a Coast Guard vet from Vietnam. I had no idea the Coast Guard was in Vietnam until I met this guy.
Yeah, yeah. It's just not
But
something that you think about.
they drove the boats up the rivers.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
had no idea that was Coast Guard.
Yeah. How
Yeah, so
crazy.
this guy, he got all shot up in Vietnam, almost lost his legs, and for
Wow.
the last 14 years, he told me this just the other day, that he had been going to therapy every other week for 14 years. He didn't leave his house except to go to like VA meetings or get groceries, and just isolated and just didn't do anything. And so he
Yeah.
got drugged to Venture Vets by another Vietnam vet,
Oh, that's great.
and the first month or so he didn't really say much. He was just quiet, just kind of sat there.
Yeah.
But now um, he laughs, he smiles, he talks to everybody.
That's
He has a
great.
great time. He's volunteering at a food bank 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And then
Oh,
just
that's
this last
great.
Thursday, he told me that his VA counselor told him he doesn't need to come anymore.
Amazing.
Right.
That's
And I was like,
that's fantastic. And how
yeah.
quick
And
was
so
that
it's,
turnaround from him
it's about
showing up
eight
to now?
months. Yeah.
Astonishing.
Yeah.
What a quick change.
Yeah.
That
And so it's just so powerful to see how having community and purpose and faith
yes. Oh,
help
huge.
so drastically to heal from like PTSD and just all of that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's enormous because, like you say, like the feeling that you had driving off of Fort Hood is, yes, you're doing the smart thing by going from active duty to reserves. You don't have that constant stress being introduced to your life from back to back deployments, but there so goes your support network. Now what?
Right.
Where do you start? Where do you how do you even begin? Where do you go? And I mean, you've created that for other people, and that's incredible. Mike. Amazing work.
So, yeah, I mean, I wish I could say it's me, but like I feel like I've just been facilitating and God just does all of this and just drops it in our lap, and I just keep rolling with it.
Well, yeah, and hey, you're putting in the work, and you're just if people have a place to physically go, I think that could be a big thing. I go to there's an American Legion Hall, but again, most everyone there is a Vietnam era vet,
Yeah,
and I walked in one day. I don't think they knew what I was supposed to be doing, and it's like, yeah, no, I wanted to join. They said, okay, well, we have a breakfast on Saturday mornings. I was like, perfect, sounds great. It's just they're just to kind of shoot the breeze and whatever else. It's like, what the hell do I have in common with a bunch of like 70-year-old dudes? And it's like, quite a
yeah,
lot actually, and it's
right.
just it's cathartic to just be able to tell your stories and shoot the breeze, whatever it is, and just to get my ass out of bed on a Saturday
Right.
morning at a decent hour. And that's, for me, my needs are pretty simple, but yeah, to have that community of veterans and especially as you mentioned in your case, I mean, there's cases of PTSD where people can't relaunch socially or anything else, and you've created a space for them to be able to do that. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's been so fun to get to be a part of it.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Now we'll probably kind of wrap things up a little bit here, but one of the things that I always ask people whenever they come on is, you through this incredible experience of, well, first you got to serve two different branches, two different MOSs,
Yeah, and I
years
just
of
retired
experience.
last April too.
Congratulations, fantastic work. Um, so yeah, you've seen active duty reserves. Uh, if someone's looking to go in today, do you have any advice?
I would say choose carefully. Um, but if it's something you're interested in, why not give it a try?
Yeah, try anything once, twice, three times.
Yeah, I mean the
Yeah.
benefits I think of even doing one enlistment,
Hmm.
like you're gonna get so much out of it. Like
For
you're gonna
sure.
get some education benefits out of it. I know that's not the reason we do it. Like we talked about that towards the beginning of my story, but
Well, yeah, if you're joining the Marines for education benefits, everything's all backwards anyway.
yeah, but I mean you're gonna get some education benefits and other benefits
Yeah,
out of it. You're gonna learn some stuff. You're gonna it's gonna I think it's gonna develop who you are as a person a little bit,
for
give you
sure.
a little bit more character,
Absolutely.
and yeah, I think one enlistment, if it's not for you, then you didn't hurt anything. You only gained from it.
Yes, exactly. No, I agree with that. I find myself slipping a little bit into the cynical, and I saw a kid on the bus the other night. He had a junior Navy ROTC patch on his jacket, and so I talked to him, and he's a senior in high school. He's getting ready to join the Marine Corps, and it was like real gung ho about it. Wants to serve his country, and again, cynical me. It's like running into like a 10-year-old who still believes in Santa Claus. It's like, oh, that's endearing, but he's gonna get crushed.
Yeah,
But you're right. I mean, ultimately, no, this will be a good experience for him. He will get something out of this, and God bless him.
yeah.
There's still kids like
I
that.
don't know it. I don't know too many people that look back on their service as a whole and be like, "Oh, I should have never done it."
Right, right, yeah, exactly. Like that's the thing. As jaded as I get about my Navy service, people are like, "Did you wish you didn't serve?" I'm like, "Oh, whoa, hold up! I didn't say all that."
Yeah,
Yeah, when you call my bluff, I'm
yeah,
like, "No, I'm glad I
yeah.
did."
No matter what you go through, I think you're hard pressed to find vets that wish they wouldn't have done it at all.
Right.
I think everybody found something in it that meant something to them and
That's
has
very
some
true.
pride in it and did something that not everybody else can do.
That's absolutely beautifully stated. Well, Mike, I appreciate you coming on, and for the YouTube version of this, the link to Venture Vets, we'll put that in the description. The It's Facebook page, right? Is where you guys have your
Yeah, that's
info.
the best way to get a hold of us. So.
Perfect. So yeah, we'll have that in the video description. But any other parting words of wisdom for this episode?
Yeah, find community, find purpose, find faith.
Beautiful and elegant in its simplicity. Mike, thanks so much
Yeah.
for coming on. Thanks for sharing your story, and have a great rest of your night.
All right, you too. Thanks for having me.
All right.